Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to your Friday edition of Pelicans Daily, brought to you by Fan Arch. I'm your host, David Grubb, editor in chief of thebirdrights.com. Well, there continues to be a strong reaction to the staff changes with the New Orleans Pelicans. On Thursday, Pelicans fans received an open letter from Detroit, from a writer for Detroit Bad Boys, the SB Nation website that covers the Detroit Pistons. And basically, in the open letter, which was entitled Best of Luck, You're Going to Need It, detailed the litany of problems that there were in the later stages of Joe Dumars' tenure with the Detroit Pistons, and then with the 4-year tenure of Troy Weaver. Now, there were comments yesterday. Somebody wanted to just remind me that Troy Weaver was not officially fired; that he stepped down with the Pistons, and that's accurate. That he did step down, but I think a lot of times in these situations, people are not leaving these jobs voluntarily. Stepping down is maybe taking control of the situation before it takes control of you. But certainly after the failures that were there in Detroit, and then just judging by what Pistons fans have had to say, it wasn't going to last much longer for Troy Weaver in Detroit, one way or the other. So the feelings there are kind of hard. They're hard feelings by Pistons fans who, when they look at Weaver, what they and Joe Dumars to an extent, is they see a lot of bad decisions that shaped their franchise. Whether it's and again, for Dumars, you leave out the Darko Milicic because that's one that everybody can just discuss and dissect, and it's the easiest one. But you talk about the guys on the later stages, who really didn't do much, overpaying for guys again like Ben Gordon or Charlie Villanueva or Josh Smith, taking guys who really didn't impact winning in the draft: Austin Day, Brandon Knight, Mateen Cleaves, Rodney White, Rodney Stuckey. Those were guys that were not, ever real contributors to the Pistons and their success. So when they look at those things and they talk about, um, Dumars having an eye for these veteran players and bringing those in while the championship run was going on, but then failing with regards to that, and then bringing in Troy Weaver, who a lot of people, on the one hand, you want to give him credit for. Look, he drafted the guys who are now paying dividends for the Detroit Pistons, guys like Isaiah Stewart. Cade Cunningham was the number one pick. So, look, a lot of times you don't give a GM a lot of credit for taking a number one pick when everyone says this is the number one pick. But Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren, though their careers, I think, have been up and down at this point, I think people generally consider them NBA players. They have been decent enough picks. And then Asur Thompson, a guy who seems like if he can reach the levels that his brother is already predicted to, uh, then he can be a very, very good addition as well. But you also worry about misses like a Killian Hayes, who's now in the G League trying to reclaim his career, and then Sadiq Bey, who didn't really turn into anything in the middle of the first round a few years ago. No picks in the second round. Didn't find any gems there. So Troy Weaver has been able to find some high profile talent, absolutely, and he should get credit of that. But I think Pelicans fans viewed him as a bad businessman, and that's really what they went into. That didn't know how to take on good contracts, took on too many bad contracts, and then bet on players who gave you no reason to bet on them. We talked about those Pistons connections, but Kelly Olynyk is somebody that Troy Weaver was high on. What does that mean for Kelly Olynyk going forward? Because Troy Weaver gave him a nice contract in Detroit. Um, Troy Weaver has tried to reclaim guys who were first round flameouts. Is that what the Pelicans are going to do? Is that going to be their new mode of operation? Is trying to win these marginal players? I don't know if that works. I don't know if that works. I think what you want to find is your stars in a small market or in any market, unless you can acquire a star. But you want to identify your stars and you want to find legitimate role players around them. You don't want to try to reclaim players. I think that's a desperate move that you take on one guy. Maybe every offseason you bring somebody to a summer league, or you give them that opportunity at training camp to see if they can impress you, maybe give them a G League deal. But you don't bring in high priced former number one picks and then just bet on them to be contributors to your team. No, you're hoping that they can end up as somebody that you can utilize in case of an emergency, and that they become someone better than what they were, but not quite ever going to be what they were expected to be. But you don't make those hallmarks of your team building strategy. Now, people can learn, people can improve, and we'll see if Troy Weaver and Joe Dumars have learned and improved from the mistakes that they made the last time they were in charge. But the general, impression from observers who are not affiliated with the league, whether it comes from fans or whether it comes from media that covered those Pistons teams, say that Pelicans fans should be wary of this combo. Now, what this has also meant is that there's been some movement out of the building and at least out of the organization so far. Uh, a couple of moves that were announced through the media on Thursday. Um, while you look at it, Joe Dumars is Swin Cash being the most, the high profile of them. I'm sorry, just got flustered for a second, and it happens when you record these things. But Swin Cash, who had been with the organization since 2019, is now on the way out. So that is an important move there. Swin, um, the credit that she's given, and I've said that I wasn't fully aware of everything that she does, and I just wasn't because her profile was big as far as like being around the team. You always saw her, but she didn't do a lot of press conferences and didn't do a lot of meeting with the media. So you're not as aware of what her role is. But you saw from the reaction from people within the organization, she held a lot of sway, especially with the players in dealing with them, a lot of development with the players. She was in control of many of the player development concerns and just taking care of their families and them while they were with the Pelicans, and then leading a lot of the community initiatives as well. So Swin had a big role within the organization, but she's no longer going to be in that role. Um, I don't know. I doubt that she was pushed out. I would say that. But I think certainly you want to be comfortable with the people around you. Swin was looking around and everybody that she came in with was leaving. And I think that does, unless somebody is affirming to you that I want you to stay. And I don't know if Joe Dumars either went out of his way to tell Swin that he wanted her to stay, or if she just didn't feel comfortable at all, if she just didn't want to be with the Pelicans. But the fact of the matter is that Swin will be leaving. One of the most visible female executives in the league will be moving on. The other folks who are stepping out, Todd Quinter, Gar Forman, both of those guys been longtime associates of David Griffin. They won't be back. Todd Quinter, he knew Griffin going back to their days in Phoenix. Gar Forman, former general manager of the Chicago Bulls, was a senior advisor. So it's not surprising that those roles will be uh, moving on, that those guys will be moving out of those roles. But with Quinter and Foreman, and Shamid Dua pointed this out, was that their primary contributions was giving information about players and scouting players. So you wonder how that's going to impact Dumars and Troy Weaver in their assessments of players in this upcoming draft. Weaver was actually with a team, remember, so he was with the Washington Wizards, and as an advisor to them, I'm sure it was in player development and identifying talent. So you would think that he has some type of information that he's bringing in. We'll see if there are more hires going forward to add to the staff of the Pelicans, and see if more people will be joining this front office. But still, considering that Dumars took this job on Monday, that's a pretty rapid reshaping of the front office and resetting it essentially, because all the major decision makers outside of Bryson Graham, who looks like he's safe, general manager Bryson Graham, you know, he looks like he's going to be around, but the rest of the front office, major shakeups indeed. The next part will probably be the examination of the team's medical staff. Again, we know that there have already been two real overhauls of the staff. When David Griffin came in and he brought Aaron Nelson, he did a major overhaul. Then he moved Aaron Nelson along and did the staff once again. I think the concern has to be on the soft tissue injuries, the injuries that seem to be preventable. I don't know. In my opinion, I would say that I think there's a combination of a lack of practice and constantly wrapping up for games. Whereas I think players who are conditioned well to practice and play, and I always have believed, and I think that I've talked to former players, and they agree that practice should be harder than the games, and that when it is, you're generally better prepared to go all 82. I think you see fewer and fewer young players capable of doing that because they've never had to be really practiced before. European players, I think, come over and have practiced more often, but we're also starting to see guys from Europe who are getting injured rather consistently. There has to be some type of improvement, though, in these types of things, and there needs to be a deep analysis of why these things particularly keep happening to the New Orleans Pelicans. This is something that goes back and it predates the David Griffin years. It goes back into the Dell Demps years where there were a lot of concerns about how this organization dealt with injuries and preventative care and making sure the players were ready to compete on a nightly basis. It has endured for too long. Hopefully, there can be some change. Um, what I wanted to do also, now as we get into the narrative of the Pelicans, we also need to look at the analysis of the Pelicans this past season and find out where their areas of improvement and where some things went well. And I think one of the things that's pretty revealing as you look at the Pelicans' best lineups last season, um, particularly their best lineup, and there's not a lot to sift through, honestly. When you go through the top five-man groups in particular, and I think that's what we'll focus on today, because it's a lot of detail when you want to get into it. But I just want to give a broad scope of what we're talking about here. But the Pelicans only had five-man units this past season that had positive net ratings and played at least 24 minutes together. So I wanted to. Because there is such a low threshold in minutes, and the Pelicans had so many injuries, I didn't want to have too many lineups to examine. So I took those that played 24 minutes. 24 minutes, that's one half of basketball together as a group. Of those, only five had positive net ratings. The best in that group, the Pelicans' best five-man lineup this past season of players who were still with the team, because the one that had more than this, two of the guys are no longer with the team, Jamal Cain and Brandon Ingram. But the best that's still made up of players who are on the team, CJ McCollum, DeJounte Murray, Zion Williamson, Trey Murphy, and Yves Missi. That group together posted an offensive rating of 129.4. So, relatively speaking, when you look at that 129.4, the Cavs led the NBA with a 121 offensive rating this past season. So, that group would have been elite amongst the very best, um, as if they had played, the entire season together. Um, Defensively, they were a 113.6. That is exactly in line with the Toronto Raptors, who were the midpoint of the NBA defensively, 15th in the league, same rating, 113.6. So you have an elite offensive rating, a middle of the road defensive rating, and their net rating the net rating of that group, 15.7. And again, to put it into relative comparison, the Oklahoma City Thunder had the best net rating in the NBA at 12.7. So where does that put them compared to the best five-man groups in the entire NBA? Well, offensively, it puts them towards the middle of the pack, 16th among all of the best fives in the NBA with at least 50 minutes played. That group played 50 minutes together this season, so just more than a game of collective minutes. But among those offensive units, 16th best. The teams that were better than them are some of the best offenses in the league. And a lot of them had multiple lineups within that group. So the Pelicans were 16th, but the Phoenix Suns had two with Kevin Durant, two five-man groups that featured Kevin Durant in that collection. The Denver Nuggets had three with three five-man groups featuring Nikola Jokic in that top 16. Sacramento had a pair with De'Aaron Fox, who is no longer with them, and with the San Antonio Spurs. So Boston had a couple. The Lakers are represented, the Clippers. So when you think of the very best offenses, the New York Knicks, the Milwaukee Bucks, the teams that were outliers in there, along with the Pelicans, the Charlotte Hornets, and the Portland Trailblazers, each had their own five-man units. Really bad teams, but have some offensive potential. That Hornets group with Miles Bridges, with LaMelo Ball, with their healthy group, very very good and talented offensively. Then the same with Portland. Some of that young talent. You know how good it is with Kamara and with Scoot. Henderson, the way he was playing at different times this year. They have a five-man group that's really really talented. So and then with net rating, not as good a group obviously because the defense isn't as good. But what you see there is the potential of that unit with Zion Williamson, with C.J. McCollum, with Dejounte Murray, with Trey Murphy, and with Eve Misi. You had a chance there to grow something that was into an elite offense and a middle of the pack defense. And if you can be that with your starters, you just need a reserve unit that can hold the line, right? Because obviously that your reserves are not going to perform as well. And even if that's not the peak of that group, if let's say it's a little bit lower, you're still amongst the very best offensive units in the NBA with your starting group, if that's the five. So the Pelicans with Zion Williamson, I think what you see over and over again is that it's a lot easier when you have that kind of impact player as far as Zion Williamson goes. Because when you look at the rest of the players in the Pelicans' best five-man offensive lineups, most of them were reserve units last year, both by net rating and offensive rating. A lot of them were dominated by the reserves. Guys like JRE got a lot of representation in the Pelicans' top lineups. Um, you'll see mostly reserves because it's outside of Zion, who appears in two of them, outside of Eves Misi and CJ, who each appear in two of them. All the rest of them are backup guys. Carlo Makovich, Antonio Reeves, JRE. Um, it's Alfred Payton. Those guys drove the better offensive units because the Pelicans really just struggled with their starting lineups and getting offensive production when Zion Williamson wasn't on the floor. Brandon Ingram was represented in a couple as well, but you saw it when those guys in particular, when you took them off the floor, Dejounte Murray had a real struggle in operating the offense this season. In those lineups without a true star on the floor when CJ McCollum and Zion Williamson were both off the floor. And then when Trey Murphy was gone also, you just saw how bad the Pelicans were offensively. But when you put Zion Williamson into the mix, and I know that there are people who listen to this and are going to be like, well, you're just making a pro Zion podcast. And I'm saying, all I'm telling you is there are few people on that roster who can impact the game the way he does. And that's a fact whether you like him or you don't. There are few players in the league who impact offensive production and improve your defense just by him being on the floor. Because if your offense is moving better, you're scoring points, you're able to get back defensively, and those disadvantages that you have, you're able to mitigate some of them just by being prepared for what's coming. If you're playing in transition, you've missed another bad shot, you get stripped on the perimeter, and the other team's going away with a live ball turnover, then yeah, it's a lot harder to get your defense set and stop the opponent from scoring. And that's where the Pelicans find themselves because when they don't have good offensive production and you're shooting hand grenades at the end of the shot clock, and those bad shots lead to long rebounds and lead to transition opportunities for your opponent, you're not going to do well. So it's really hard to find those justifications, even if unless you walk through that building. And I think it was interesting. I was watching The Right Time with Bomani Jones, and he was talking about the Dallas Mavericks and their situation with Luka Doncic before he moved on. And they said, look, yeah, Luka was immature and Luka wasn't great about these things and didn't do all the things you want out of your superstar. And they wish he had excuse me, they wish he had paid more attention to his nutrition and his fitness. But the fact of the matter is, the Mavericks were a really good team when Luka Doncic was on the floor, and they were building a roster around him, and that there are worse stars than Luka Doncic as far as being problematic in this league. And I would say, the main takeaway there from Tim McMahon, who recently wrote a book about Doncic, was that sometimes the frustration is worth it. And the on-court production has not been there as far as the number of games for Zion Williamson. But what you know is that when he's on the court, he plays very well. And the team is better. It's still above 500 with him on the court, I believe, for his career, and below 500 without him. And I think that, yeah, there's been so many games without him, but I think if you finally build a roster around him and just take, I know it seems silly, and you'll say, you're addicted to this cycle, but I think you continue to give talent that opportunity unless they tell you or reject you so strongly that you have no choice but to move on. And I don't feel that Zion Williamson has gotten to that place yet. The Pelicans can make that happen. They absolutely could. The Pelicans can make that happen, but there's no need to do so just yet. You can blow it up. And I think one of the things that Tim McMahon and Bomani Jones were talking about, they said, you didn't have to do this. You didn't have to make that trade for Luka. And you don't have to trade Zion Williamson now. Maybe if you had done it, look, if you had done it years ago, it might have made more sense, when you traded him at peak value and you said, this isn't working, this marriage is not going to work. We need to move on. But where you are now, both organizationally, reputationally, as far as this being one of the least respected franchises in the NBA by people around the league and by fans, where you are now is I think you have to pay that price a little bit longer and see where this takes you. Because taking Zion Williamson off the court, and to a lesser degree, CJ McCollum, and we'll talk about that when we get to the CJ evaluation portion. Um, but last season and throughout his career, it's been hard to find anybody more impactful on this organization when they're on the court than Zion Williamson. Like Herb Jones can put up similar on off numbers, but just the process of winning and losing, Zion Williamson. I mean, that's just a fact. So I think that the Pelicans, will have all that information in far more detail than what I'm giving you here today. But what you're going to see is that, I think that the math and the business of it all, the financial considerations, what it would mean losing out on that kind of star player. And I understand that if the Pelicans get into a position where it's, you have the number one pick, it's really easy to get excited and build around that. But you didn't get a whole bunch of buzz from the last number one pick who had a game built for television and built for fans, kids, everybody to really love, who could come in and have more anticipation than Zion Williamson. Nobody. Even if it's Cooper Flag, there's not going to be the same level of energy that there was for Zion Williamson. It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry. It's not the same. It's not the same excitement. They're not calling Cooper Flag the most, impressive young player since LeBron James. As good as Cooper Flag is and as talented as he is, it is not that type of buzz. It's just not. So if you're the Pelicans, you have to be really careful about giving that away. It's hard to put that lightning back in a bottle. It's hard to find superstars. It really is. It's hard to find them. And when you don't have one, you are constantly in search of one. You are begging one to come to your organization. You are trying to find the assets to acquire one. And there are fewer and fewer of those kinds of players who simply by their presence elevate your organization, who make everyone around them better. And the lineups, the advanced numbers, the individual numbers show you have one of those. And you're talking about giving them away when the organization has its own failures and has not done its job. And there, you have the opportunity to maybe set this right. You maybe have an opportunity to find out what the best can really be. Take that shot. Take that shot. I think the Pelicans should. All right, finally, we're going to look at a couple of young players who got varying degrees of opportunity this season. First up, Jamal Cain. Jamal Cain had an interesting season with the Pelicans, fell in and out of the rotation at different times. This was his third year in the NBA, came to the Pelicans from, had 2 years of experience with the Miami Heat. He was on a two-way deal this season. Ultimately, in 37 games, the most of his career, Jamal showed some flashes of athleticism, but little else. Averaged 5.3 points per game, just off his career high. Rebounding numbers, average, across the board. Shooting numbers below average, I would say, for what you're looking for at that position. His per 36 numbers, not particularly great either. Didn't shoot it great from three, only a 32% shooter from three this season. So you didn't get any impact from him. And I think it's his time in New Orleans is up. He was somebody that was necessary because of the injuries, but there's no reason to invest any more time or effort, I think, into him. I think if another organization would like to, good for them. I'm not wishing to the end of this young man's career by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't see where his value is. He's not as talented as Keon Brooks, not as developed as Keon Brooks, who is younger than he is, um, and he's too small to play the power forward position. And though he has some athleticism, there's no fluidity to his game. I don't think you saw his any natural ability to handle the basketball. Again, his shooting numbers weren't great, and you didn't see him as a great contributor on the defensive end either, whether it was blocking shots or rebounding or turning in, the kind of effort that made you remember him. He had a couple of nice dunks at different times of the season, um, but again, that's not enough to get you a long-term gig on an NBA roster. Um, he put up some. He had, he took the opportunity, put up some numbers down the stretch in games that didn't matter. Was able to string together some double-digit games to close out the season. But even in those, you know, were you impressed? And I don't think you really were. So if he's on another two-way next season, fine. But if you're seeing him on the main roster, then chances are things have probably gone wrong. So um, nothing impressive, nothing really embarrassing. I give him a C minus for the season. Good effort. No problems in the classroom, but nothing exceptional or memorable from Jamal Cain. Jordan Hawkins, a disappointment. Uh, I guess if you're a disappointment for others, but not for me because I didn't expect much from Jordan Hawkins this season and didn't get much from Jordan Hawkins this season. Ultimately, he played fewer games than he did in his rookie year, 56 appearances down from 67 as a rookie, but he got more minutes, more shots, um, and more opportunities than he did as a rookie, even though folks were saying that he was being held back by Willie Green. Willie Green gave every opportunity for Jordan Hawkins to prove that he belonged in the NBA, and Jordan Hawkins doesn't look like he belongs in the NBA. His scoring went up because he got more shots, not because he got better. Because his overall field goal percentage down, his overall 3-point percentage down, his effective field goal percentage down. So he didn't improve other than doing what NBA players do. If you give them more minutes, they'll put up more numbers. But his per 36 numbers don't look any better from his rookie year to his sophomore year. His per 100 possession numbers, no better from his rookie year to his sophomore year. In fact, they go down. They were worse offensively. They were worse defensively. He's as bad as a defender as there is on the Pelicans roster. He's not a good ball handler. He's not a good passer. He can't contribute in other ways. He doesn't give you enough athleticism. He's got an injured back. He's not a good shooter. And if it feels like I'm just piling on, I'm just telling you that as a first round draft pick, there's nothing. There's nothing. And I'm going to say it one more time, there's nothing that Jordan Hawkins has that makes you think he's going to be either a starter or as a number one pick become an all-star worthy, a sixth man of the year type. There's nothing to indicate that. He doesn't move well without the basketball. Nothing, nothing that indicates that Jordan Hawkins should get one more investment by the New Orleans Pelicans. If they can trade him this offseason, if they can move off that deal, then do it. It's that simple. If you're asking me for a letter grade, it's D. And if you looked on your report card back in the day, what does D stand for? Poor but passing. He showed up and he competed. Good for him. But the rest of it, poor. Poor but passing. And I would say poor but passing poorly if we're talking about his ability to pass the basketball. So Jordan Hawkins, yeah. If you can't tell, I'm not a fan of his game. Again, as a young man, this is not what we're talking about. We're just talking about basketball. Just talking about basketball. And as a basketball player, Jordan Hawkins, disappointing pick, disappointing output, and I don't see where his future is in New Orleans if he's going to turn into any kind of basketball player. He's going to become anything to be a rotational player. Jamal Cain can do I mean, not Jamal Cain. Um, Antonio Reeves can do everything that Jordan Hawkins can do, and he does it better already. All right, that's your show to head into the weekend. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave your comments and your questions in the section below. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Man, just the growth has been so fantastic for us, the top 500 subscribers already, and just continue to see people embrace Pelicans Daily. I appreciate it. I thank you for that. You know how to follow me on social media. You can check me on Blue Sky. You can check me on Instagram and on TikTok. I'm on all three. So I continue to update you throughout the summer as we learn more about the new edition of the New Orleans Pelicans. Until then, I'm David Grubb. Don't forget to check thebirdrights.com as well. And y'all have a great weekend.